I've got my first guest on the No Clue Drift Crew podcast, and his name is Mason. He's my 14-year-old son.
Hello, my name is Mason. So, I've got some questions. And for my first one, my birthday's coming up, so I'm going to be driving next year. And I just want to know, what's the best first car for someone who wants to get into drifting?
So, if your dad owns a drift car parts company, I would probably look very carefully at what he's got going on and base my choice on those. So, based on what you see, what are you interested in?
Um, I like the way that IS300 looks.
So, you like the body kit stuff we got going on there?
hmm
That's not a bad choice. It is an automatic car, and my hope is that you would learn to drive stick. So, for that, it might not be the best choice, but it'll get you started.
hmm And I'll just move on to my next question. So, I've put in a bunch of hours in on the sim. Um, Well, how close is it to actually drifting? I've heard you talking about it a little bit. I just want to hear more about it.
So, I downloaded a bunch of cars for Assetto Corsa, and I think that it was like kind of a horrible experience for a real drifter. And so that's why I got this wild idea to port over all of our real world data, since we scanned the entire car and we developed the whole suspension system in CAD, and we tested in the real world. And I thought it would be interesting to like come full circle and since we have like all the numbers that everybody else that's developing cars for drifting in Assetto Corsa, if we used our actual real world car preferred suspension settings, and we used all the geometry that comes from that chassis and all of our parts, just how close would it be if we're using all the models, all the real world data. And I was totally impressed with the results. And that was probably one of the hardest things that I've ever attempted, because it's way outside my zone. I've never developed any kind of gaming related thing before in my life. So I just started to learn, started to experiment. I figured out a lot of stuff. It was very hard for me, but I think it really paid off. And anyone can experience the most realistic drift car just by going to our site, and for $10 they can download it and have a feel for that thing themselves. And I'd be really interested to hear any feedback from people that get a hold of that car and compare it to just other downloads that are out there.
I like how you transitioned into marketing your product, getting some sales.
I mean, it's only $10. Let me guarantee you that like the amount of time that I spent on that will never be covered by the the $10 download. Oh, but it wouldn't hurt. I can take you out for a taco.
All right. So, um, something else that I'm curious about. So, how does stuff like camber, caster, offset, toe in, toe out actually like affect performance?
So it affects performance greatly. So let's break it down like one by one. So if we talk about caster and high caster is related to high speed stability. So cars like BMW that are designed in Germany to drive on the autobahn, they'll have a high degree of caster. And there's another thing that's related to caster that does the same thing, which is kingpin inclination. And just to break it down for you, like caster is kind of like if you see like a chopper motorcycle and you know like the forks are like sticking like way out there, like when you view the bike from the side, that is kind of like how the suspension leans back, and it's like the direction of the shock in the car, and that's what we call caster. And then KPI or kingpin inclination is just the same exact thing, but it's viewed like looking directly at the front bumper. Anyways, they both do the same thing. The problem is like if you imagine that chopper bike, and if you put like 90 degrees of steering into that bike, then you can imagine that front wheel is just gonna like flop over on its side. So in the car, it has the same like disadvantage. So when we have double the steering angle, then it kind of just eats the sidewall on the tire when you have like 60 degrees of steering angle. So you gotta kind of balance that stability. And there's another thing about caster that's great. A high amount of caster is a lot of self-steer. So when you put steering into it and then you just like let go of the steering wheel, then the car straightens out on its own. So you have to balance those advantages of the caster with just the lack of tire contact patch at full angle. So as far as toe goes, generally if you toe in, then the car will want to drive more straight. And if you toe out, then the car will want to change directions really fast. So, if you're having trouble getting your car to drift, you might want to do toe out. And if you need more grip, then you might want to do toe in. And then, did you also mention, what other item did you mention?
Offset.
Offset. So like wheel offset, like how far the wheels are sticking out of the car. Generally we're going to want them to poke out so that we have steering angle clearance on the inboard side. Because it's kind of easy to like roll your fender or maybe even put on like a wide body, fender flare. It's easier than like hammering the metal on the inside of your wheel well. So we simply want to like move the wheel out, and everybody loves the look. So.
All right. Well, another thing I really want to know is, what's the best way to make easy power?
Easy power. The best way to make easy power is for you to be like rich, because horsepower is expensive. So basically in a drag race, the guy that wins the drag race is just the guy with the most money. So this is why people are really into drifting, because it changed that dynamic. When you understand like all the different aspects of drifting, like weight shifting and all the different drifting techniques, this kind of like elevates your skill level and how different that is from the next guy, not how different like your bank account is from the next guy. So you could drift a really low power car and you can have the time of your life, and it just doesn't have to be like the most expensive, highest power car. In fact, when you're just starting out and you're learning drifting, because it's so easy to smoke the rear tires by just like slamming down the gas pedal in a high horsepower car, you would be better off focusing on all that dynamic car control, like the weight shift, different methods of initiation, and just getting to know that first before you add the power in. Then when you actually add power later, then as a driver, you'll be so much more ready to like handle that power.
How about cheapest?
Cheapest what?
Cheapest way to make power.
The cheapest?
What would you say?
Dude, it's not cheap. The cheapest way to make power. I've got it. So one of the most popular engine swaps is to like put a V8 into Japanese cars.
Mm-hmm.
So the hack on that is just to like get an older Corvette that has the same motor that they swap into like S chassis Nissans and 350Zs, and you know what? You can drive a Corvette for like any amount of money, and they all have the same formula. They all have that Chevy V8 motor, that LS that everybody loves, and you know what's way cheaper about it is that you're not buying a motor mount kit, a wired motor swap wire harness, like a transmission and like drive shaft, adaptations into that other chassis. If the car already comes with the power that you need, then that's a drifting hack for sure.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it makes sense to focus more on skill than like about like it's not about like who has the fastest car. It's about like who can maneuver and who can just drift the best.
For sure. Any other questions on your mind?
Well, this one is kind of off topic, but why do BMWs leak so much?
That's like a meme thing.
Yeah.
But it's actually a real life thing. Like, things are funny because it's actually that way in real life. So, I mean, basically, like, the dudes just, like, lower their beamers so that they're scraping the ground all day long. And that's just a really hard life for an oil pan. And probably they're more concerned about, like, how much camber they have and what kind of wheels they have than when was the last time that they actually, like, maintained the car. So they probably bought the car with like a leaky oil pan gasket, and they probably just let it go and put all their money into like replacing tires because they have like 16 degrees of negative camber. So yeah, that's why they're in the memes.
Well, another one I've seen is why do Subarus blow up so much?
Subarus blow up so much because unfortunately they have like a notorious head gasket problem. And it's extraordinarily hard to replace that because it's a boxer motor, meaning that unlike the inline 4-cylinder, there's 2 cylinders pointing in opposite directions.
Yeah.
And the direction that they're pointing in is the frame rail. And then so if you need to take the head off to replace the head gasket, basically that motor's coming out. So yeah.
Oh, that's everything. Thank you.
Thanks for your questions, and we invite lots of dumb questions on this podcast so that we can enlighten everyone, and I hope that they're not shy. So I appreciate those, especially the funny ones.
Thank you.